The Batman is the latest film from Matt Reeves. Over the last decade, he's become one of my absolute favorites by delivering mature, complex blockbusters. So today we're going to stop and rank all 6 Matt Reeves films from the worst to the best. Hi, my name is Sean, and I started this channel because I was driving everyone around me crazy talking about movies way too much. If you can relate, you're probably in the right place to consider clicking that subscribe button. With that in mind, go ahead and join me down below in the comment section. Share your ranking of the Matt Reeves films that you've seen. My list isn't the right list, it's just my list, and I would love to see yours. And before we get started, I have done a bunch of these director rankings before. The Christopher Nolan films, the M. Night Shyamalan films, David Fincher, Christopher Nolan, and a whole lot more. If you enjoyed this video, check out that playlist right up there when this video is over with, and let's get started. In last place, his first film, The Pallbearer. A middle-of-the-road rom-com for 20-somethings, all about that transitional phase once you've finished the development phase of life, but where you haven't quite figured out who you are as an adult, where you're trying to figure out your career, your love life, all while processing everything that's happened up till that point in time, and it's okay at that. The cast and crew here are pretty fantastic. There's so many familiar faces in front of the camera as well as behind the camera, where you have J.J. Abrams as a producer and, of course, obviously Matt Reeves as the director. But I think the film is shackled by a sitcom premise, and it doesn't help that the star of the movie was one of the stars of Friends, where the inciting incident is basically a guy is asked to be a pallbearer at a funeral for someone that he doesn't remember, and then he's asked to give the eulogy. It just feels like a leftover episode of Friends that was turned into a movie, except it doesn't at all have the tone or the comedy of Friends. It's not that romantic because the guy is so faulty and making so many bad choices. So it's good enough, but it doesn't really stand out at any one thing. In 5th place, Let Me In. Now, as a point of reference, there's a pretty big gap between The Pallbearer and Let Me In. This is a very good film, and even its placement in this ranking is somewhat just a matter of taste, because I think he did a very good job with it. And as a second point of reference, I haven't read the book or seen the previous version of this film. This was a first-time watch where I did not really know the story going into it. At its core, this is a tween coming-of-age story about a boy who is heavily bullied and the vampire girl that befriends him, and somehow it takes this horror premise with some vicious, gnarly kills and turns it into a very sweet story about childhood innocence, friendship, and first romances. All along the way, it finds a way to make you buy into this incredibly unhealthy relationship of what it actually stands for by showing just how vulnerable this child is, how horribly he's treated at school, and showing how the simple kindness of someone around him can truly move someone in a direction, if you stop and think about it, is quite horrifying. And so a story that I really didn't know what to expect going into it, and I thought it told its story well, had some nice little scares in it, and was very effective at what it was going for. In 4th place, Cloverfield. Now, in general, I'm not the biggest fan of found footage films, but there are a handful of them that I think are very well done, and one of those is Cloverfield. It takes you and puts you first person in the middle of basically a kaiju Godzilla story as people are trying to survive as big gigantic creatures are destroying the city. And what it does so well is sets up a set of characters where they feel normal enough, relatable enough, and it makes you care about the people that they care about as you're on this adventure to try and rescue this girl, see if she's okay, as the world is literally crumbling all around them. In interviews, Matt Reeves talks about how when he tells these fantastical stories, he tries to have the fantastical element be the one thing about it that's unbelievable and make everything else feel grounded in a world that we live in. And that's what he does, and that is why the found footage element works here, because it feels so much like people on the ground level experiencing something unbelievable. The production values are top notch. The cast here is actually surprisingly good for being a found footage film. And as I said before, I don't really like this subgenre of film. This is easily one of the top 3 of that genre. In third place, The Batman. When they announced that Batfleck was out, Matt Reeves was actually my #1 pick to replace him, and thankfully, he was the person that they hired, and he delivered the Batman movie that I've been waiting for 20 years. Finally, we get to see the Dark Knight as the world's greatest detective, and Warner Brothers gave him the budget and allowed him the freedom to tell this slow, dark noir story about this populated Gotham where Batman is investigating this series of murders where the Riddler is turned into this Zodiac killer, and John Doe from Seven inspired version of that character. And all along the way, every character has a rich backstory. Everyone has connections to other people. Everything feels real and realistic while at the same time being fantastical. There's a bunch of fantastic standout performances. This is so much the Batman film that I've been waiting for, that complements the other great Batman films so well that it's frustrating that it's not quite as good as I'd hoped it would be. I think you reach a point in time, and when the mysteries are all resolved and the story kind of keeps on going for another 40 minutes, just feels a little bit like they let the air out of the balloon. And while I think this is a movie that needed to be long, I'm not sure it needed to be quite as long as it was. That's what makes this one so frustrating, because it's so good on so many levels. I love so many things about it, but there are things that just stand out to me as just not the best possible version of the film, which holds it back a bit. Our runner-up, War for the Planet of the Apes. Matt Reeves' satisfying and gut-wrenching conclusion to the epic Planet of the Apes reboot trilogy, and possibly one of the most bleak and depressing special effects blockbusters of all time. With this trilogy of films, they were able to craft what I would say is the best character of the decade in Caesar, where he starts in Rise of the Planet of the Apes as this sweet little ape, and by the time you get to this movie, they reveal him not just as a leader and an action hero, but a deeply flawed character that can make mistakes, that can be driven by emotions, but all along the way, he learns and he grows and he cares so deeply about other people. And that's so much of what makes this movie so compelling, is that you care about him and the journey that he's on. And he's not even a person. As I've been saying all of this, I've been using an enormous amount of mental energy to try and use the right language to refer to him, and I'm almost certain I've made a mistake at least one time while recording. Beyond that, Matt Reeves just does such a great job of writing these stories just filled with unexpected turns that all along the way find ways to just turn your guts on the inside and take things in directions you do not expect it to go, and then pay it off so well. And while you hate the humans in this movie, all of them except Nova, all of them except one of them, you hate the humans in this movie, at the same time, you can see why they're in such a desperate situation that they believe they have to do something absolutely insane, cruel, and merciless, not just to survive, but for mankind to survive, in which case you even understand why they're such wretched, awful people. And that's where you tell a special story, where even the worst characters seem reasonable based off their own experiences and their worldview, and you clash them with other people that have equally developed worldviews, and you create situations where value sets come in conflict with one another, where you would never think it rational to mow down innocent people until you realize there's this virus spreading and there's so few humans left and you don't know anything about it. What are you going to do if you don't want all the humans to die? And suddenly you're thinking, well, that's not as crazy as it sounded just a few moments earlier. And Matt Reeves gives you all the spectacle that you want with the action. He provides a war movie, but a different kind of war movie, as this one's much more The Great Escape than Saving Private Ryan. And all along the way, having true earned emotions. And that's what he did so well with both of these films, as well as what was done so well in Rise of the Planet of the Apes. But in first place, Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, a special blockbuster. A movie that's able to deliver an ape on a horseback, dual-wielding machine guns, battling a tank in an utterly serious, gut-wrenching tragedy. It can take the most ludicrous description you can give to an action sequence in a blockbuster and play it in a movie with true earned drama and emotions. And that's what this entire trilogy did so well, is developing characters with different value sets that come in conflict with one another. Whenever someone does the worst possible thing in each of these movies, you totally understand where they're coming from and why they're doing it. And as villainous as Koba is, he's someone that was tortured for years by humans, and he is unable to show them mercy. He views them as the horrible people that did horrible things to him for the first stretch of his life. You get that. When there's humans that just view apes as these monsters, that's coming from a standpoint of almost the entire human race has been wiped out, and in some sense it goes back to them. You understand each of these worldviews, the conflict driving together, and this very intricate balance in the first half of the film where humans and apes are trying to work together, and they don't trust each other, and they probably shouldn't trust each other. And there's all this very delicate balance can easily just fall apart, and you see that take place in the second half of the film. And it's so gut-wrenching because you had hope. You almost saw the ideal version of all this playing out, and then it collapses because apes can be just as broken, just as selfish, just as flawed as humans. And that's what ends up happening. And even as you get to the end of the movie where Gary Oldman wants to blow up all of the apes, and he's kind of played as this angry villain in the film that just won't, like, he's just trying to help humans survive and won't trust the apes. But it's because he cares so much about humans in a way that he's just desperate. It all makes sense. And it's also filled with so many great, simple moments where they turn the power on. So for the first time in maybe years, his iPad turns on and he's able to see a picture of his children that he hasn't seen his children's face in years. And they're right there. And then you lose that. That's what these movies can do so well. They can have a moment so human in a movie where you have Koba with two machine guns on a horseback battling a tank, which is a stupid thing to put in a movie. But boy, is it so good in this particular movie. So I think that this Planet of the Apes trilogy is easily one of the top 10 trilogies of all time. Maybe the best trilogy this last decade. I have to stop and think about that. But truly special blockbusters because they're tragedies with amazing characters, ridiculous sci-fi action, and all of it feels earned. All of it makes sense. And with the latter two, that goes back to what Matt Reeves was able to do, continuing the work from the original film, working with the original screenwriters to just create an amazing trilogy of films with who I think is the best character of this last decade, Caesar. So Dawn of the Planet of the Apes is the best of the bunch, so it comes in at number 1. If you enjoyed this director ranking, I've got more just like it in that playlist right over there. I did Christopher Nolan movies, David Fincher, M. Night Shyamalan, Michael Bay, and many, many more. Check them out right over there if you've enjoyed this video, and thank you so much for watching.